This is where a lot of people seem to get lost in these conversations about indigeneity, thinking that having an indigenous background is the same as being indigenous. But let's explain why that is not true and why that's actually harmful for actual indigenous people. Indigenous people identify ourselves and identify each other by culture and community, not by blood quantum. And on a community scale and not so much an individual scale, we have these long-standing, unbroken traditions of culture, stories, and identity. The colonizer literally tried to wipe us out. And when they couldn't physically wipe us out, they tried to wipe us of our culture. And still, they could not do it. We are still here, we are still indigenous, and we still practice our cultures, and we still participate in our communities, and we still identify as our nations. When you don't have that unbroken line of tradition and identity and culture, it is a slap in the face to those of us who sacrificed so much. My ancestors sacrificed everything to remain indigenous. For people who do not have that unbroken line of identity, culture, and community, those people have to reconnect to that. And it's a struggle and it's a process, but it can be done. And then those people, their lineage can continue unbroken, strong, and indigenous. But until you do that reconnecting, all you have is a background, but you don't have the identity. So having an indigenous background is not the same as being indigenous. And people who just have indigenous ancestry or an indigenous background claiming that they are indigenous is a huge slap in the face to those of us who are actually indigenous. Those of us who haven't diluted our cultures and our identity. Those of us who don't just say that they're indigenous to suit a conversation. It means that people like me, when I try to assert my identity as an indigenous person, I always get people like this trying to speak over me because they feel like they have some sort of, feel like they have something to say because they have an indigenous ancestor, but they don't have a clue anything about our cultures, like our communities. You don't know what kind of problems we're facing. You don't have a clue. So when I try to assert my identity as an indigenous person, I often get thwarted because of random people who keep claiming that they're indigenous, but they're really not. So then they think that I'm one of those people, and I'm not. I am actually Native American. Yeah, I'm actually indigenous. And a lot of y'all don't have that. Some of you just have an indigenous background, but you want to take up the same amount of space that I'm taking up. And you just can't do that. I'm not just indigenous when it suits me. I'm indigenous all the time, every day, in every moment of my life. And that's how I'll ever be.